Hey, it's Michael Douglas. Welcome to another episode of Dr. Pundit, where we talk about music, not medicine. And this is kind of an episode I've been wanting to do for a while, and it's on the band Journey. And if you talk to anybody today, Journey has a legion of fans. And yes, I'm sure there's some hardcore fans, but most of the fan base is usually the casual fan who's aware of their biggest hits. Most specifically, Don't Stop Believin', their top 10 hit from 1981 that should have been a number one hit, but is the band's cornerstone and will be around long after the band is pretty much interred into the ground. And that's what most people focus on, and for good reason. The mark of a great song by a band like Journey is a testament to years of hard work, before and after, and it's funny how one song can really set the tone and the characterization of a band. And when you think of the band Journey, most people do think of Steve Perry, but I want to talk about somebody who I think is probably more responsible for setting the stage, the public perception of this band at its most critical time. And that would be in 1980, before they launched into their better known 80's output than their 70's output, where they were more of a progressive band before Steve Perry joined in the late 1970s. I want to talk about Jonathan Cain. And could Jonathan Cain be responsible for where the band is today instead of Steve Perry? Well, I think they worked well together. Journey was on their way up in the rock world at the end of the 1970s, and they basically were on the cusp of true crossover success at that time. They made a pretty significant lineup change around that time, and I feel that lineup change was really responsible for the band they ultimately became. Jonathan Cain, who was formerly of the group The 80's, that was a group that gave us John Waite, for example, and had a few, top 20 hits. They never hit the top 10 in this country, but had a couple of top 20 hits and are well known for a pair of hits. The tracks Isn't It Time and Every Time I Think of You. But let's get kind of back to the story there. So Jonathan Cain is formerly of this band, and the guy was a master keyboarder and a songwriter, and just a really significant addition to the band in 1980. Greg Rowley served as one of the founding members of Journey, and the original idea for the band was that they'd serve as a session group, but they'd also record a lot of progressive tracks. The group originated in the Bay Area in California. But they quickly realized that their sound was a little bit more unique than just to be relegated to these background functions. And after forming in 1973, that's right, the band did form in 1973, they released their self-titled album in 1975. Now, on the first three albums released by the band, Raleigh also served as the lead singer. And while their popularity steadily rose in that time frame, they felt constrained by having their singer stuck behind the keyboards. And in order to connect with the audience, as a way to get them to imprint upon this band, they needed a dedicated lead singer. In comes Steve Perry. And with, an instantaneously memorable voice and a soulful voice, it really started to pay dividends to the band, of course. They gained more and more radio exposure on albums like Infinity, Evolution, Departure, and the latter two of which each spun off the band's first top 40 hits. And the best known of the bunch would be Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin', a top 20 hit, and Any Way You Want It. Now, in 1980, the album Departure was released, and it gave the band their first ever US top 10 album. But it also marked the end of an era of sorts. Greg Raleigh decided that he was ready to get off the train, so to speak, and his singing role had been greatly diminished by Steve Perry's presence, and that was the reason why Perry was hired for the band. And the split was amicable there. And, that's a good way to end. There is not a lot of strife. And I think the band became healthier as a part of that, obviously. And they focused on Jonathan Cain, and that's when they began to focus on getting a new keyboard player. Raleigh did that function as well. And they found Jonathan Cain. Again, Cain was part of the group The 80's, and he jumped at the chance to be a part of the band Journey. And he certainly wasn't getting that level of success with his former band, The 80's. And that band actually ended up breaking up after John Waite and and Jonathan Cain left the band. Now, Cain made an immediate impact on Journey's formula. And for one, he updated the band's sound with a focus on piano and synthesizers. And I like to think he really showed off his chops on the 1983 album, Frontiers. That's the album that gave us Separate Ways, a great track from that summer of that year. But, Jonathan Cain was a master of the synthesizers, and it was something that was really well suited for in the band Journey. At the dawn of the 80s, that was the decade of the synthesizer, which evolved into what we know of it today. And just as important, though, Cain became a songwriter, a crucial songwriter, joining Steve Perry and guitarist Neil Schon to basically form this trio of songwriters for this band, an embarrassment of riches in any band, and something that can only propel Journey into the stratosphere. Cain helped convince the others that their lyrical content should focus on subjects to which their core audience could relate. And as a result, out went a lot of the progressivism in the band, progressive rock, and replaced by heartland rock and tender balladry. And when Escape was released in 1981, Cain's first overall album with the band, Journey shot to #1, and they had 3 top 10 singles, all of which were co-written by the keyboardist Cain, and they all made the top 10 of the pop charts. Journey's transformation into a mainstream rock juggernaut was complete with that hire, and it's fair to say that he played a big part in catalyzing that transformation. So when you hear a Journey track, yes, Steve Perry is out there front and center, but think of the people kind of in the background. Even though they really weren't in the background, they kind of were. But they all worked together to give that band the initial push that just launched the careers of one of the best known bands in the late 20th century. Journey. I'm Michael Douglas. If you like what you see here on the channel, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe. And as the late great Barry White always used to say, let the music play. And I'll see you on the next episode.